are you doing? This is Alex, and this is another episode of Valet Stories. On this episode, what we're going to be discussing valets who have quit in such spectacular fashion. So, what do you mean spectacular fashions? You've heard some of the stories here and there, and I think there have been snippets of it, but we're really going to go into details in this episode. Now, the first story comes from an individual, and let's say this. I actually mentor kids on a weekly basis. I go to the high schools, the junior high schools, and different places, just talk to them about entrepreneurship, about business, about family, and different things at different facets of their life. Perhaps they're missing a father figure or something like that. And honestly, that's my way of consistently giving back. I've had a lot of successful guys have now gone to the military, they've graduated, and they've become different, better people overall, and it honestly makes me feel good that I was a part of their life at one point or another. This one particular kid, he was a very nice young man, and he had very bad trust issues. He didn't really trust adults very much, but we had a very good rapport. He was a car guy, so we discussed cars a lot. And after a year, he said, "Alex, I know this is uncomfortable, but would it be possible for me to work for your company?" And I really put him through the ringer, and I really don't like crossing that line because I'm from the mindset you don't mix business and pleasure. And not that that's pleasure, but that's personal from business. I didn't really want to mix the two. Well, I said, you know what? These are all the things I'd expect from you. Do you think this is something that you would understand? And he's like, yes, sir, definitely. I'll be the valet that you want me to be. And I gave him that opportunity. So this started in probably mid-December, I would say, maybe 2018. So he's working, and I really didn't have any problems with him, but I think he was late once or twice. But one issue I really had with him, he got upset because it was freezing cold and he didn't want to work. So one of the valets went into the bathroom, and when he came out 10 minutes later, the other valet is gone. I get a phone call, "Hey Alex, I can't find the other valet. I don't know where he went. Did he call you?" I said, "No, I didn't hear from him, but I'm not quite sure what the case is." Then he's like, "Oh, never mind. I found a note he wrote." And basically the note said, "Too cold. I'm out." I guess that's his way of quitting. He didn't want to do this job anymore, but he didn't have a respect enough to call me and say, "Hey, Alex, this is not the job for me," whatever the case is. And honestly, I've never heard back from him again. It's kind of a disappointment. And I know from this point forward, anybody I ever mentor will never ever become a valet again, at least with my company. Not in a bad way, I just don't want to cross that line and break that bond that we once had. Now, the next story is actually quite interesting. I had received a phone call from a nightclub, and they were very disappointed with the current company that they had. They felt that they were ciphering money and not really being honest with the amount of money that they were supposed to be turning in every night. I explained our procedures on how we have checks and balances to make sure our valets do not steal money. And he felt very secure with that. So he said, "You know what, Alex, I'm deciding to go with your company. Probably in another week or two, or at the end of the month, we're going to start with you." So I get a phone call, and he basically states he told the valet company, the current valet company, that this was going to be their last night. They were going to have another company starting next week. And the valet company decided to quit right then, right there on the spot. They still had 30, 40, 50 keys. So what did they do? They took all of their equipment. They took every key off the hook. They threw it into a box and took all their equipment, left, and threw the box of keys on the front door of the the bar, and said, "You know what? We're out." So they quit in spectacular fashion. So they called us, and I was able to go in there with one or two guys at probably about 1 o'clock in the morning to start help deciphering what these keys were. Because not only that, they took their tags off, so we didn't even know where these cars were parked. That's actually a very bad position because you really piss off your customers quite badly. They can start picking through. Not only that, there's a liability issue because they could sit there and say, "Hey, I have a Mercedes," when they actually came in a Honda, and they drive away in a Mercedes. The club wouldn't be any wiser. So we had to come in, devise a way of saying, "Hey, what type of car did you have? What is your procedure? What is something that's in your glove box or something that's in your registration that we can prove that this is ownership? We're very sorry this happened." But most most everything went quite smoothly, and I think we got all the cars out. Now, that restaurant, I keep saying restaurant, I apologize. It's a restaurant and a bar, but this bar was so grateful. We were with them for the entire run until they went out of business, probably another 2.5 years. But that is a spectacular way of quitting a company. Even though it wasn't a valet that did that, that was another valet company that quit in that fashion. Now, everybody knows, or for the most part knows, that we hit an airplane back in, I would say, about 2007, 2008. We'll get into that story later on, but what I do want to tell you is the valet who hit that plane, she did quit. We wanted her to stick around, but after she hit do you want to quote the price on the airplane? Yes, it was over $40 million jet. She hit the wing, she banged it up pretty good, and she ended up quitting. She was the sister of one of our lot managers, but he's like, hey, she quit. I can't get her to come back. Not that we really want her to come back. I still don't know the reason why she ran driving forward into the wing of a plane that had been there the entire night. But I'll get into that story a little bit more further later on a later episode, but that is our airplane story that people love so much from the VinWiki stories, and that's actually probably what kind of put us on the map. Now, this next story is interesting, and we do not have a conclusion to this. Again, some people might have heard this story, but this is a story where we had 3 cars, or actually 2 cars, stolen in the night. I think, honestly, what happened, the valet was working. The other valet didn't show up. The first valet didn't call us to let us know the second valet didn't show up, and he was trying to handle everything on his own. So what happened, the valet was parking cars. He probably didn't pull the keys out of ignition, and 2 cars were stolen. I don't know if that was the case, but at the end of the night, I get a phone call that the valet is gone, and we have 2 cars missing, which were, I believe, an Acura TSX and a Audi A3. On top of that, we have a Tesla key that's missing, and everybody is pissed. So I go down there, my manager goes down there, and we're calling this valet. He's not answering. The last video showed he rolled away on his skateboard, and we didn't see him anymore. I think the manager ended up seeing him because we ended up calling the police and going to his house in the middle of the night, probably about midnight at this point, to find out where the keys were. His answer was, hey, I dropped all the keys on the podium. I don't know, or the hostess stand inside the restaurant. I don't know where they went after that. You're never supposed to drop the keys on the hostess stand, especially without letting the manager know inside the restaurant and with the valet company that you're dropping keys early. So the video shows at 9:30 he dropped the keys, rode away on his skateboard, and I think honestly at that point he had the car stolen and he didn't want to face the fire, so he quit. So by quitting, I went after him. I was pissed. I needed explanation, so we filed suit against him. Whatever his name was, let's just say his name was John Smith, he lived at home with his parents, and his dad's name was also John Smith. So this was actually John Smith Jr. that worked for us. So when we sued John Smith at the home, the father responded and said, hey, that's me. I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know anybody by that name. I don't even know this company. This is a false suit. So when I tried to reapply and say it was for John Smith Jr., he's like, oh, he no longer lives here. I don't know where he lives. You're on your own. So we've never found this kid. I'm really upset with it. We will find him one day, but that is, I don't want to say spectacular. It was actually kind of a-hole way to quit, especially when you're not giving answers and you couldn't be truthful for what happened that night in the restaurant. Now, the final story I promised you guys about, this is insane. I got a phone call from one of my other valet attendants, and they said, hey, Alex, we're pissed off. Let's just say this guy, Victor, keeps coming in late. But they were not ever telling me this, because usually if a person's running late, I can discipline that and say, hey, you know what, you're late. This time I'm not going to discipline you. Next time we're going to dock your pay 1 hour because you were 1 hour late. This valet was kind of intimidating to the others. He was a bigger guy, and he's like, don't you say anything. I was just late for whatever reason. And the valets never said anything. Well, one day I get a call, and they said, you know what? We're sick of it. This guy has been late all the time, and we're the ones that are doing more work to cover his shift. So I called him and said, you know what? You're being docked. You've been late too many times. You're going to be docked. He's like, you know what? You're going to do that? You're going to be a BITCH? I quit. So he quits. So I'm not at the office. I'm actually out in the field. I don't know where I am. I'm in a car somewhere. And I get a phone call that this valet is now at the front door of our office expecting his final paycheck right now. So I called him. I said, paychecks don't work like that. You have to go on the next pay cycle, which could be another week or 2 weeks because we get paid every 2 weeks. So he was upset and he demanded his paycheck. And it was to the point where he went out to his car. The office staff locked the door. He started banging on the door. I told them, call the police. So the police come out and they want to know what's going on. And honestly, I don't want to get this valet arrested. I just want him to leave. He'll get his pay on the next cycle. So the police department actually gets on the phone with me and they say, is there any way you can pay this guy right now in order to get him to leave? So I don't know if I Venmo'd him or Cash App or what's the other one? You can use Zelle, but I ended up paying this guy just for him to leave the office and just be like, you know what? Good riddance. But this is the way this guy quit, and then he ends up showing up at our office 20 minutes later demanding his final paycheck. So these are 5 crazy, insane stories that just flew by. Do you think these are crazy and insane stories? This stuff happens all the time. You wouldn't believe it. I have a list of stuff that happens constantly. So if you're entertained by this and you like this, please subscribe, click that notification bell, and I'll be back with more stories.